Hello, everyone, and welcome to Blabbit. It's great to see everyone here today. This is episode 63. And for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, we have a wide array of experts in various fields who are lending their tips, their experiences, their insights for certainly for us, Glenn and I, the hosts of this show, but also for you who are all watching. So, welcome to Blabbit. My name is Paul Geiger. I am a New York City public speaking coach and presentation expert. I work with individuals and certainly work with organizations about making sure that their messaging is impactful and clear. Glenn.
Paul, thanks. Hi, everyone. My name is Glenn Ingram. I've been working for the better part of the last 2 decades to expand my experience with sales and communication and influence and helping share that with others so that they can be more powerful speakers, listeners, and influencers. Lisa, good morning. How are you?
Hey, Paul. Hey, Glenn. Thanks so much for having me here on Blabbit. So excited. Long-time listener, first-time guest. And I am a business humorist, an improv ninja, a 2-time TEDx speaker, podcaster, author, mom, prank enthusiast, caffeine snob, all of the above. So I love to work with people to add humor to their talks, to their presentations, and improv for everyday living and for teamwork.
Nice. Well, I just want to mention to everybody who's watching that, yes, Glenn and I ask very insightful questions. At least we think that they are. But if we miss anything, we encourage everyone to put it in the chat. If you want to ask Lisa, certainly questions, or Glenn and I. So please, we encourage everyone to do that. So my first question is, I know that you work with clients and you utilize humor to reignite passion, to make the story more interesting. But what do you do when people say, I'm just not funny, which I actually find funny. But what do you do when people say, I'm not funny? How do you break down that barrier?
The first part of saying I'm not funny is actually admitting that you know how important humor is. So you're saying, I'm not funny. What am I going to do? That means, aha, I can work with you because you want the funny. The funny is there, but certain brains are meant for other things. I don't want my mechanic to be hilarious. I just want to get back on the road. But if I go to a presentation or a workshop, there is, the importance of humor is to engage the audience and be relatable. So whether you're a stand-up that's doing self-deprecating humor or you're a mom sharing a mom story like mine about how I vacuum so that the lines all line up, it doesn't mean I have OCD. It just means that it has to be that way and no one can walk in the room. Yes, it means I have OCD. I do. And so to state that you don't have humor, that's a great thing to work on, because when we share your story, you and I go back and forth and talk through it. I'm going to say, there's something you can do.
So is the best kind of humor, at least to take the training wheels off, is self-deprecating humor, would you say?
It is not always self-deprecating, because right now is a very sensitive time. We're all very sensitive. And so I would want to know, are you doing the written word, the spoken word? Are you presenting a whole workshop? And I want to find that spot. One client I recently had, she also was doing this keynote, but she was also on my podcast. So I knew her pretty well. And something that she didn't even know was funny is that she's bilingual. And I find humor in the sense that most of us are not fluent in Spanish, and she is. And so we worked through how she could say something really, really provocative in Spanglish, but it was really asking where the bathroom is. That's funny.
Yeah.
And important to know.
That's right. Everyone laughs at el baño humor.
For her, it works because she could say a lot of things, but she could say, where are the carrots? And it would sound amazing to me.
Agreed.
My wife laughs at me with my resort Spanish where I go, baño?
¿Qué pasa?
Well, there's an interesting thing that you actually bring up right there for everyone to see, Glenn, is the importance of body language. So why don't you talk a little bit about that, Lisa? Because I know that I work with people And I tell them, when you're in presentation mode, a little bit of funny goes a long way. It really does. And a lot of it has to do with the way that you deliver the words that you're saying. And a lot of the way you deliver the words you're saying is with body language. What has been your experience working with clients on that?
We all know that, well, my experience from being on stage for 20 years is closed arms is closed off. And I once had a director that we had such a bad habit of, because you stand, you don't know what to do with your hands. Look at photos. All men clasp their hands down in front of their belt. That's what they do. Because to have your hands hanging is awkward feeling,
Right.
not awkward looking. So it's a point of paying attention to, this is closed off, but this is welcoming. And I know you've talked about that, Paul. I've seen some of your stuff. It's so important to be open. And one of my favorite things that you shared before, Paul, was the timing of it, and to know not to talk like this with your hands. I'm from Minnesota. That's what we do. So I put my hands in my lap. It's just as important as not just reading off of slides. If I want to read off your slides, just send me your slides.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's why we have
Glenn,
to have Paul sit down, because he started putting one hand in his hip and then his pocket and posing all the time.
The one pocket pose.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. But
That's
well,
very J.C. Penney, showing you my jacket. That's very J.C. Penney, the one pocket.
right. We call it casual elegance. It goes a long way. But I agree with the body language, and obviously, I think one of the most difficult. Oh, there goes the burrito in the microwave again.
It wasn't mine, not my sounder.
Every time it does that, we're going to switch positions.
Okay, there you go. Right.
Or we could play new choices. Every time the sound goes off, you have to repeat what you just said. Whoever spoke has to change what they just said. That's called new choices. That's an improv game.
Okay, now this is becoming intriguing, rotating Hollywood squares.
That's right.
Or Brady Bunch credits. Either way you want to look at it.
Ba-dun-dun-dun-dun.
So the body language, once you start gesturing, you just keep gesturing. I think for a lot of people, though, the difficult time is when they're actually listening. But in reality, you don't have to gesture when you're listening. That's kind of stealing somebody else's show.
Right. Right. It can be. And it's distracting, as distracting as saying all the time. Oh, it's distracting as when you kick your leg above your head.
There we go. Slight variations. Yes. I love that. All right. So let's talk a little bit about storytelling. How do you go about helping someone discover their stories? Because I know certainly Glenn and I, when we see the funny in stuff, and we understand what a story actually is all about. How do you make it easier for people to experience the fact that everyday circumstances become these stories? It depends on how you look at it, right?
It does. Stories are so relatable. Even pre-show, we just shared a few things that related, and it's so relatable. It doesn't matter where you live. Certain stories are relatable. And something that my husband says I'm very good at is small talk. So if we were at a table and you each had your wives there, I'm going to find out what we have in common. I'm going to find out what you do for fun. I'm not going to necessarily ask you what you do for a career. So even during the pandemic, when it was at its worst and our only interaction was going to the grocery store, I would ask the checkout person. They'd say, "Did you find everything?" "Yeah." "How are you?" "Good, good." All of that is just so superficial, but we're conditioned to do so. So when I go to the store, I would say, find everything. Yes. What are you doing for fun? That's totally off the grid of a checkout person's day. I found out one gentleman, tie-dyed shirt, ginormous guy, big old dreads in his hair. He fosters little baby kitties. And when he shared that with me, it was just his demeanor. "Oh, you want to see a picture? We've got 3 fosters right now." And another girl was in a dance troupe and they could practice through COVID. And she was so excited to tell me that. And I remembered that the next time I saw her. So the thing about it is stories connect us. I may not be in a dance troupe or be allowed to have kittens because my husband won't let me, but we can all relate to that. And story sharing is really what life is. Since we go back to the cave days where the first memes were the stick drawings on the walls, right?
Oh, yeah.
Story sharing, storytelling, and we all have the uncle in the family or the grandpa who's so great at it. And it's what connects us. And I crave to hear the end of your story. I'm such a curious beast. And on my podcast, I ask every single guest towards the end, tell me a dare or a prank that you've done or had done to you. Now, that takes it way off of here's my book, here's what I do, and all these things too. Well, when I was 6, we used to do this thing
Mhm.
at school, and it just tips the whole thing over, and you realize how we all have, it reminds you of another story, and it's relatable. It's how we connect.
You
Mhm.
know, kind of what I'm thinking about was back to what Paul said, where sometimes a little humor goes a long ways. To those people who maybe don't have the deepest sense of humor, kind of how you kind of monitor that. Because I literally just caught a few moments of Seinfeld before the show came on. And I remember that episode when he said, everyone thinks they have a sense of humor, even those who don't. So, how much do you have to filter and be careful when you're speaking in front of a group with that humor to make sure that those that don't have it aren't going to feel out of place when everyone's laughing and they don't get it?
True. Well, I have the blessing behind me of having helped raise 2 autistic sons. 2 of my stepsons are on the spectrum, and I learned so much from them that sarcasm is gray, and people on the spectrum don't do gray. It's black, it's white, it's fact, it's in a book. Gray sarcasm, doesn't work. So when you pick up on that in your audience, that maybe some of your things aren't reaching or reacting, you want to kind of alter what you do, but you don't want to stop the humor necessarily. One of the things I do as a fun trick is if I say something and I can maybe tell it's not reaching, I'm going to pick on somebody in the front that this is a comics old trick here. You find that person in the front that is jovial. That's fun. And I know that would be one of you guys. I would tell that you've been engaged, you've been funny. I'm going to just pick on Glenn. And maybe I asked his name earlier, and that's my guy I keep going to. So if I just told a joke and I could tell it kind of hung through part of it, I'm going to go, Glenn, what that means is back in my day, we had cassette tapes. It was, oh, never mind. And then other people kind of pick up on that. So you might kind of play and find that one person. And that person usually gets a gift at the end from me too.
Oh, that's nice. That's nice.
It's one way
Well,
to do it. You want to make sure you're including the whole group, but it's not possible. And guess what? There's people who are there that are loving it and not an outward smiler or a laugher. My mother was that way. She'd be at every one of my shows and sitting like this. One day I finally asked her, Mom, it doesn't even look like you're enjoying it. She goes, I don't want to miss anything. I'll laugh
ah,
later.
no, that's a great point. That's the point that I bring home whenever I'm speaking to anyone about reducing or mitigating public speaking fear. Because I say in those opening moments, whenever you're getting up to give a presentation or you're on a job interview or you're in a client facing sales call, you cannot, I dare anyone to tell the difference between someone who's listening intently, like your mom, or someone who's judging that you are full of it. And
True.
therefore, you have no right to be speaking to me at all. But of course, we as, egocentric human beings, we can't help it to a certain extent. Our ego goes, what's wrong with me?
Of course. Of
And that
course it
throws
does.
people off. That
Yes,
throws people off.
it
Sure.
does. And some are jealous because you're up there and they're not. Or why
Hmm.
didn't I think of that? If you have all that in your head, you're probably not quite ready to take the stage because you need to be confident in what you're presenting. You need to plant your feet, stop the arms swirling, don't do the ums, and present what you have a passion about. It should be a true passion and be you and know that you're the brave one willing to be up there in front of those people and that you just want to get it out there. Afterward is when you get your great feedback and you know what works and maybe what didn't work.
Hmm. Now, Glenn, you remember quite a few episodes ago, probably back near the end of 2020, beginning of 2021, we were talking with Josh Fletcher,
Mhm.
and he made a really interesting statement. And it just what you were talking about, Lisa, just reminded me about that. And he said, because he does speak at conferences and whatnot about digital marketing, he said he does always tell a story of personal vulnerability, because his take is that if the audience who's listening can see that I'm being vulnerable and honest about this, sharing this, whatever comes next is true. And I think that that's an interesting lesson for anybody who is in the position where they have to speak like an expert, because there's a problem there with our egos. We think I have to prove to everyone that I know the most and I'm the smartest in the room. When in reality, you just have to be really authentic and genuine. And then pretty much whatever you say after that is going to be taken on face value. And you
Very
wouldn't be
true.
asked to be there if you weren't some kind of an expert anyway. So.
No, and that's just like comedic performing. I ran and performed in a sketch comedy troupe for 2 decades. And what the pattern is for a show, which you can shorten it to your talk, is
Mhm.
that you can't always be up here with your humor. If you're always up here, there's no break to bring it back up. So you're up here, then you have maybe a softer sketch that's more of a thinker, or more, it's just an aha. It's not necessarily gut laugh, but
Mhm.
that brings that gut laugh back. I would say there's the same pattern in any kind of talk you have. Make sure that your content isn't all data, all humor, or all seriousness. You have to have the roller coaster dips in there to bring the audience back up and keep their interest. You don't want to be so predictable. Don't tell me everything you're about to say. You already lost me then. Just take me
Mhm.
on the ride, but make it have some turns and a little bit of difference in it.
Well, and don't you find that with people that are speaking up in front of people in any size of group that aren't confident, aren't really, don't think they have the experience to do so, they'll do that and they'll speak to them instead of talking to them.
Mm,
You're speaking to, giving them all the data instead of having a conversation, getting some interaction, getting some relatability. And in my experience, I'd like to know what your opinion is on this. When you're doing that or seeing people doing that, the disengagement factor goes off the chart. As opposed to if I'm involved and I think you're talking to me, I'm going to listen and retain a lot more.
absolutely. You want to include them if you can. That's one of the things I do when I'm speaking. I call myself an interactive speaker. One of the examples was pretending that Glenn was in my front row and I'm going to chat with him a little bit. But I also have questions, and they're not the kind that are
Mhm.
right or wrong. They're going
Right.
to be the kind, tell me about, does anybody have any kids? This kind of thing. Um, I can ask you guys, have you two ever done improv?
N-
So raise
I've
your
n-
hand if you've done improv.
I have not done improv, but I have been part of a comedy troupe. But it was written. It was all written stuff, and that was
Yep.
back in another chapter, another lifetime.
Send me a video. So I always say that, raise your hand if you've ever done improv. Very few do. Okay, then raise your hand if you ever had a partner, a kid, a boss. Your hands should be going up at some point, gentlemen.
Oh
But
yeah, yeah.
then yes, you have done improvisation because you've
Right.
had to answer to your boss, maybe where that report is, or why you were late,
Mhm.
or something. I'm not saying you should lie to your bosses. Mine happens to be a
No.
chief of police, and you can't lie to them. They know me already. But the thing is you have to know that you are doing improv when your kid happens to ask in the middle of the store, "Where do babies come from?" Not today, kid. But you
Yeah.
have improv skills. It doesn't necessarily mean you're on a stage with a spotlight. We all do improv to some extent.
Mhm.
I think that is what's more fun and exciting. Little story. One of my daughters was giving a speech, and we were giving some help with it. And we took these 25 note cards and put 5 bullets on one thing. And I said, "We're going to talk about this, and you know what to talk about. Then go to the next thing." And she kind of looked at me and said, "I'm supposed to wing it, Dad." And I said, "Honey, winging is what pays for everything we do in our life, because that's all Dad does.
Nice.
He wings it."
Nice.
Mhm.
Dad's a wingman.
Mhm.
Now you brought up something interesting. You do work. You said your boss is the chief of police, so you work
I
you
work
in
by
some
day.
capacity.
With
Oh,
5
okay.
sons, you can believe I have a job with insurance.
Sure, sure. We all have a side hustle or
That's
several
my side
side
hustle, is my full-time
side
job,
hustles,
yes.
if you want to consider it that. Okay, so let me ask you this question within that context. How and I know what my experience is, but I'm interested to hear from both of you because we have all had interactions with police folk, police men, police women. Isn't sarcasm a big part of their survival mechanism? Isn't that? Do you find that that's true? Have you the police officers that are not pulling you over for a traffic violation, then they're being very serious. But when
True.
you're speaking to them, is sarcasm a big part? Is humor a big part of how they get through their day?
I couldn't work there if it wasn't. There is such humor and release and trust, and you will never, if any of you work with officers, you know to never ever share a weakness. I had to overcome my fear of spiders because I shared that I was afraid of spiders. Now
Oh
I
boy.
told them I'm afraid of $20 bills, and it's not quite working that way. Never share your weakness in any kind of a group. Never do that. But the humor behind the scene is absolutely necessary for stress release. One of my officers, I call them my officers, but I'm the assistant in records and dispatch. One of my guys was actually shot at 2 years ago when he approached a vehicle and the shotgun came right out the window and they just blasted. And he survived it, chased him down, and then provided medical for the man when he crashed. Just how can you even overcome such a thing? Humor became very important about that, and everyone rallied around, of course. They're just some of the most sweet people and caring, and they remember dates and things that are important to you, but boy, they'll get you if they can. And somebody just put on the officer's combination padlock backwards on her locker while she was gone. And I got it undone for her. I got her a combo. It's just little jokes like that that just keep everything picking on each other. It's almost like everybody's brothers and sisters.
Well,
Mhm.
you talk about that, Paul, right after we come from improv. Because while I'm back in the Midwest, I do associate with far too many people that are retired police officers. And I've been introduced as FBI, Secret Service, Deputy Chief. And if you're not ready to go along with the stuff to help go along with the joke,
That's
it's going
true.
to bomb.
You better go with it.
I've
That's
been introduced
exactly
to many
it.
things.
You go with it. If they tell you you're Colonel Sanders, you're balking.
That's right. I'm going for the spicy batter.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, wow. Well, I got to tell you, I had an interesting experience. And, I keep coming up with interesting experiences again from my past chapters in my life. But there was a time about 25 years ago, if everybody can imagine that, a much younger Paul
When you were 5,
was I was shooting a movie in New York City, and I was a detective in this movie.
Ooh.
And I was the lead detective in the movie. And we were shooting a scene on a Sunday morning, right in the outskirts of Queens. It was right by what at the time was the old Shea Stadium where the New York Mets played. So we're sort of in a beat up part of the street, factories and whatnot. And we're shooting a scene where I find somebody and I interrogate him rather physically, but I'm wearing a rather a jacket, like a tweed jacket, but underneath I have a holster and a fake Glock on me. Well, this was one of those run and gun movie sets. So you're really, if you're using uh, any kind of gun, any kind of firearms in New York City, you have to have a police officer because it's so easy to suddenly say, well, wait a minute. Is that real? Is it not? And, things could get out of hand very, very quickly. I'm not sure if I actually pulled it out, but I had it on my person. Well, we're shooting on a Sunday morning, and all of a sudden around the corner comes a lazy patrol car. Just really, way down the road, just slowly coming at about 10 miles an hour, really slow, really, really slow. And so, of course, we all see and we all stop what we're doing. And does that look suspicious? And the patrol car comes up, and the officer who's driving the car stops, and the director comes over, and he just looks at the police officer, and the police officer looks at him. And this killed me. He says, "You got something you want to show me?" Just like that, and without
And you
missing a beat,
said,
no, he wasn't talking to me. He was talking to the director, another like
oh,
hardcore New Yorker. And
oh.
the director said,
Give
without
me the
missing a
accent.
beat.
Give me the accent with it.
Oh, okay. Well, he's from Queens, so so basically he said, yeah, the permit's over there with the producers in that building over there. That's it. That's all he said. And the officer looked at him. There was silence for about 20, 30 seconds. Director looked at him. Officer looked back at him. And he just drove away. And that was it. It was like, whoa.
How fast was your heart pounding?
I know, because, we basically all could have been arrested at that point.
Oh my
But
God.
can you imagine that? I mean, the cool, I had so much
Yes.
respect for the cool on both sides, really.
Yes, of course.
But
They're
that
both
was,
just saying, here's what I could do.
I don't know if that's an example of sarcasm, but it certainly
Oh,
was
yeah.
profound.
It was profound
to
because you
experience.
understood both sides. That is
Yeah.
amazing. And what a great story. Actually, you had me right in there.
Yeah. It's so I'm in there myself.
Oh, I love it. And so, Glenn, I don't know as much about you as I do Paul, and you're into more of the sales end of things, true?
Yes.
I'm wondering, have you ever heard about asking for 5 no's as a sales tactic?
I don't think there's very many of those things. I haven't been around, but yes, if you're not getting some no's, there's a problem. Yeah, there's all different types of little techniques like that. I think the best story with that, and I think I've shared this with Paul before, was I'm up in South Dakota working with someone up there and kind of helping coach them a little bit. And this guy in his head knows every 10 doors I see go in and knock on, one person's going to set an appointment and buy from me. And so we walk in this place and he tells this lady, "Would you just say no to me?" And she says, "Excuse me?" He goes, "Just say no to me." And she's like, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Well, the last 8 people just said no. I know if you say no, the next person is going to be intelligent enough to talk to me so I can help them." And she said, "I'm not going to say no. Yeah, we'll talk to you."
Oh my God.
There. That's great.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Yes,
That is
I have heard that
brilliant.
one before. And that is a great one. That is really just, to me, that's bare bones psychology right there. It's just like cause and effect, Really
Yes.
simple.
Well, and
Reverse
you talk with
psychology.
humor. With sales, if you're not going to do something to have some fun, it's repetitive. Oh goodness, here comes a salesperson, blah, 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 blah. So the more you can have some fun interjecting anything, and what I've tried to train people is when you're walking in that door, if you're making a phone call, you have nothing to lose right now because they're not your client. So enjoy yourself and have some fun. I remember one time I was back here in Omaha, Nebraska, actually, and I walked in an insurance company, and you're walking kind of down through the building, and right around the corner was the receptionist. And I said, "Can I buy some insurance?" And she said, "Well, yeah, what insurance?" I said, "No, I need insurance that started 5 minutes ago." And she kind of looked at me. I said, "I just got in an accident. I need insurance now." She got big. I said, "I'm kidding. I'm with advertising. Who manages around here?" She almost had to go to the bathroom right there. And she made sure the owners met with me because I made an impression. I wasn't the typical person that just comes in dry and trying to do all the salesy types of things.
Yes, that is so akin to saying, "What do you do for fun?"
Mhm.
If as long as it's not sounding like you're trying to pick somebody up. But that sentence just goes so far to learn about the person, and then you'd remember that the next time you go to her sales desk. And then now you two have this story and this connection
Yeah.
together
That's
that you
right.
can always open with that. I love that.
Now, making an impression. Now, what you just told us, Glenn, is in my mind, and I'm sure in the minds of a lot of the people who are watching this, incredibly bold. That's an incredibly bold thing. And I know, Lisa, you live in the world of incredibly bold. So it's really interesting when you are able to start something off in such a manner like that. I tried something at a networking event, and there must have been about 20 or 30 people who were all in this networking event. And it was typically, we were meeting, or at least many of the people on this were meeting for the first time. So it was like, well, what do you do? Just say what you do very simply, and then move on to the next person. So I said, all right, I'm going to try a lesson in being really bold. Not that I have any real problem being that way, but I figured, let me really give it a shot. So they said, okay, Paul, what do you do? And I said, I help people focus on their fear of death. And then I stopped for a second, and I could see everyone going. And I said, because once you remove public speaking fear, what else is there?
Oh, smooth.
And then
Nice.
people were like, oh, okay. Now we know what you do. We'll
I
remember
thought
that
he
one.
sold parachutes. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like, where is he going
Yeah.
with this? So rather than, yes, I mean, not to denigrate any profession, but, yes,
No.
I'm a manager, or, I'm a CPA, and I do, tax season is my busy season. But,
Right.
it just talking about what you're known as, I don't know. It's a different way of looking at things.
To evoke curiosity is to get the interest and the connection and be remembered.
Mhm.
That's the
Exactly.
main thing. And to those who are not exactly ready to try that, I recommend trying it anyway, because if what you're doing isn't working, why wouldn't you try something new and be a little more memorable? Whether it's a funny business card or offer someone a piece of gum. When's the last time somebody offered you a piece of gum? Just get out there. One of the things that I do, and I post these on Facebook, they're in my book, is serious selfies with strangers. And this is a dare I did to myself. And one of the main things I tell anyone is dare yourself daily. Now, whether that's actually putting on pants for a conference, I am wearing pants, or if it's having
Totally
that.
optional. This is Blabbit.
Or having that crucial conversation with your boss, or making it out to the mailbox because you haven't left the house in 3 days. Dare yourself daily. And sweat in the weird places, the things that make you a little bit, "Ugh, I don't know if I should." You should, because you're going to regret more that you didn't than if you did and it failed. At least then you know. But just like your story about going to the door and asking for a no, and the whole, I help people face their fear of death. For myself, it occurred to me as my husband and I were walking down the street, and two young ladies had just come out of the ice cream shop, and they were standing by a beautiful brick wall in an alley in downtown La Crosse, Wisconsin. And they were doing selfies with their ice cream. We're young, we're going to live forever. Ice cream, yay. And I went up and I said, can we get a selfie together? And I was nervous because I don't know these people. But in my mind, I was like, that would be so weird to do serious selfies. Let's do it. And they were very open to it. And then as I raised my camera up and I set the timer for 3 seconds, in that moment, it occurred to me to say, let's not smile. One girl's like, are you an influencer? And I was like, I'll have to look that up. I don't know. And the other girl means, you mean be serious? And I was like, yeah, don't smile. Try that at home. Try that with somebody you know, because it's ridiculous. Because of course you're going to laugh, and you laugh ahead of time. It's like laughing at a place where you're not supposed to laugh. And so you're trying to be serious and the
Mhm.
camera's up and you're like trying to be serious. And when I get the serious one, I do serious selfies with strangers and I hashtag it. And I've had people share them with me. What came out of daring myself like that and sweating in the weird places is a whole big dang deal, because I met many people through that. And when that particular picture came out in my book, it turns out one of their aunts knew me through my shows. We all got together. We had coffee. We went resale shopping to a used clothing place down the street. We were singing ABBA and we lied and said we were in a musical. And all of that because I dared myself and crossed the street to get in on the fun with the ladies and their ice cream. And I have so many stories like that of real relationships that happened because I did a serious selfie. And only one person out of a few hundred has rejected my offer, and I'm pretty sure he was wanted by the Popo. So
Well, and I think what some people don't understand, I mean, there's a reason why you have the term adrenaline junkie. For a lot of people, they get that nervous pit in their stomach, that funny feeling and stuff like this. But
yes,
most people don't realize, and let's not tell anything like this live so other people know it. Once you get used to that feeling, you miss it and you want it.
right,
And it's fun to go out and
right.
do those things. I tell people who are afraid to do things like this, if you want to learn to start communicating with people, start sales, go to a town 30, 40 miles away, go to a mall and just walk up and start talking to people about anything.
Yeah,
Because
yeah. I mean,
that's
there's
all,
stranger danger, but then you could get a serious selfie. Whoop,
yeah. I mean,
there they
that's
are.
all it is, talking to people, communicating. That's awesome. Yeah. What's the
And
worst
you're
thing they
right.
say? No?
That's what can happen if yeah, that's the magic of putting your phone away.
Yeah.
Oh
Get your
gosh.
head out of your hand computer.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Whippersnappers.
That's right. Okay. So now I want to hear a little bit about your TED Talks. How did that come about? What was the process like? I know we have a lot of people who tune into Blabbit to hear various things, but some of it is about public speaking
Mm,
too, and about putting together a speech. And I'm sure you have some anecdotes from that experience.
thank you. I do, and I also work with I've got 2 different people I work with right now that are preparing their TEDx, and I can teach them how to apply. I can teach you the importance of setting up the speech because I've done 2 different ones. One was in April and I auditioned and got in. And during the audition, it was not expected that we also were judging each other. So let's say that Glenn just gave his 3-minute pitch, and then the rest of us go on and we say, here's what I liked, here's what I thought was lacking. I think he'd be good. I didn't know it was going to be like that, which again, improv for the win. I can go with anything. And
Mhm.
then when I did make it through, we all were online for 8 weeks, giving our same speech to each other for 8 weeks. Around week 6, because it was going to be on Zoom because of the silly pandemic, then one lady said, "Why couldn't we be in person in Indianapolis?" Um, oh, how could that work? And they made it work. It was very
Oh.
limited people in the audience because you had to count on all the workers as the whatever it was, 100 allowed in the building, period.
Mhm.
We kept our masks on until we were on the side of the stage, came out, did your talk, put your mask back on, very safely done. Meeting those people that I had given my talk to for a month and a half, meeting them in person was almost like meeting Carol Burnett, which is my goal. And if you have her phone number, let me know.
Mm.
And that was amazing. So that whole process, at the same time, I was going through a master class coincidentally. So I love when serendipity just happens to happen. If you're willing to see it, it will. And the master class was guiding me as I was presenting and practicing. So you have to have your opener line. You've got to draw people in with that first sentence because we are a scroll happy society. You've got to
Mhm.
have your through line. And that one took me forever to understand. Just because it's me, it didn't make sense to me for a through line. I certainly am a storyteller, but it was a very specific way to have your message like this through all the sentences, right? And then
Yep.
a star moment. What is that? What that's going to make people remember your story? And then your takeaway. I'm going to leave you with this now, and if you watch a TEDx and you know these things, you're kind of going, they've been through the same training, or, ooh, they're lacking there. Where was their star moment? I don't get it. That was all data. So
Mhm.
I think I've referenced data twice as being bad. I am not a numbers person, so no offense, but no, I don't do numbers. So my second TEDx, so that one was in April and I got to travel and be there in person. My next one was on Zoom, and I'm lucky enough to be married to a videographer that could do the 3 cameras, the editing, the lights. Couldn't get a stage because that would have been hundreds of dollars. So we rented out, borrowed my ex-husband's karate studio and set up our own curtains. Doesn't it
Oh,
sound like, oh, my mother will do costumes and we'll use my uncle's barn?
and the
But
whole neighborhood can be in the
that's
show.
it. That's the way it was. So always stay friends with your exes. That's rule number 1. And that one went through Brazil. And So I had April and August, and they were released together, I think early September, like 2 days apart. Not what
Wow.
I wanted because you wanna go, "Hey, watch for this." You wanna do all your marketing. No, they accidentally came out 2 days apart. So, because remember, TEDx's are all, volunteer driven. So it's not
Hmm.
like you can go, "Listen, producer, I want my stuff toot sweet." For one,
Yeah.
we don't use that term, but also you can't push somebody that's a volunteer. So, it was my idea to get everybody to chip in for the person doing all the editing from the live one because that's a heck of a lot of work. Like I said, I'm married to a videographer, so
Sure.
that's my experience in a very rapid tell because it was amazing to be international over Zoom and all the clicks on it that happened. And that one was all about pranks. All pranks and
Hmm.
why pranks are good for you and not mean.
Hmm.
So,
We'll
the
come back
first
to
one was
pranks.
about how humor saved my life.
Right. We'll come back to pranks in just a second,
Yep.
but I have said this before. Glenn knows that I have said this, but it works perfectly well with your disclaimer about data. And that is, and about numbers, because I work with a lot of people in the New York City area who are in finance.
Oh,
And if I had a nickel for every time they said, oh, it's just numbers, this is just a quarterly update or whatever. And my response is always, if it was just numbers, they'd have two computers talking to each other.
nice.
There's a story in
For
there.
sure.
So,
Yes.
it's your perspective
Mhm.
take those numbers and filter them through your perspective. Number one, why is it important to you? Number
Mhm.
two, why is it important to your listeners?
Yes.
And
And
then
the
meld
data
that together
people
into one message.
sure, and the data people also have their client stories too, because 'cause they're not working with people who crave numbers, they're working with people that need help with numbers, and that would be relatable to me.
Right. Exactly.
Now, you've mentioned improv a few times, and I kind of look at it whether, again, when we're talking sales, and Paul said this before, we talk about external customers and internal customers. So, internal customers, maybe my coworkers, my boss, stuff like that. Everything we do in life is a negotiation, a conversation, a sale, if you will. And it seems like some of us are a little bit quicker on our toes, which may make you a little bit better at improv and back and forth. And again, it's going to travel across different mediums of your life. As a quick example, one of my fraternity brothers when I was in school was a traveling comedian in the summertime. And I remember one time we're sitting having lunch at this place at school where we would hang out at, and he tells someone, if someone comes up to him and says, hey, will you tell a joke or whatever? And he says, do I ask you to do your job here? Leave me alone.
Exactly.
But you have to
Exactly.
be on your toes when you're doing these things. So, is there a way to practice for someone that's not quick on their toes to learn how to do this? Or is it one of those things where either you have it or you don't?
Excellent question, Glenn.
Hmm.
It is all about listening. Improv to me can be taught to any sales team. Right now, we are in the most creative time that in our generation have ever experienced, where some businesses are ending up going remote forever, that they're saving money on buildings because they do realize we can work remotely. How do we keep our team connected? I have a million ideas. I love to do that. I love to play with ideas. And you take this idea, just like with sales, and now I have a brand new idea. So that is what improv is. And the number one thing is listening, active listening. You're doing improv with your partner. Are you at home? Are you truly listening? Or are you waiting your turn to share? Ooh, I'm guilty. I'm guilty. I'm
Hmm.
guilty. So it doesn't mean I have it all set. I just know the right things is active listening. And in improv and in life, it's having your scene partners back. So that's whoever you're talking with. If you're out in a restaurant setting and you all know that couple where they just kind of jab each other. They go, "Oh, I wish he would do the laundry." I don't want to hear it. Have their back in person, in private and in public because
Hmm.
how does that feel to always be jabbed like that? And so that's what you're going to do with your people that you're working with then. You're going to actively listen, you're going to have their back, and that builds trust. And trust is the only way to create a scene, make that scene build and be funny, and then find your way out. So let's pretend Paul's not funny and we're in a scene together. Glenn's going to join and he's going to throw in something new like t-shirts. Who wants to buy a t-shirt? And then that gives us a chance to do something funny with the sayings on the t-shirts that we
Hmm.
make up. and then we all have an out. So that's what a scene is in improv. You introduce who you are just by saying popcorn here. Now you know I'm selling popcorn. You introduce yourself, find a conflict, and then you're out. And along the way, find some ways to be funny. And when you've worked together, as long as my team and I have, right now we have a couple of parties coming up that we're doing improv for. We'll do a brush up, but we certainly don't need a whole lot of routine work because we have worked together for so long and I rarely have changed people in the group. And it's
Mhm.
just such a tight group. I just can't wait to go play.
Well, for people who aren't practiced, isn't it also, I mean, listening is incredibly important, but isn't there a level of giving yourself permission? You have to give yourself permission to be in touch with whatever sparks,
Mhm.
whatever comes up. And that can fly in the face of an overwhelming feeling of needing to be right.
Mm.
So very often the perfectionism that we feel within ourselves is a huge hurdle to get over in terms of doing improv because you don't know if you're saying exactly the right thing, right, Glenn? Like in a sales call, you don't know if you're saying exactly the right thing, but you've got to roll with it. You've got to be
Right.
able to say, you know what? I will say something that's good enough and it will get me there. I often use the analogy that you know what your destination is, but don't fall into the trap of looking at your feet. Just don't
True.
do that because you will fall right off course.
Yes, and that is so much what the active listening part is. Improv doesn't have to be funny. And that's what a lot of people picture improvisation is a stage, a spotlight, and being very funny. There's a lot of improv that's long form, and it's basically establishing your characters, your conflict, and your story without humor. There is that style of improv. It's not my style because everything I do is hummingbird fast, and it's just always been that way. That's what I prefer. But there
Right.
is the long form improv, and that is very much like doing your podcast and doing this show. This is all improv. You might have had a catalyst of questions, but when you look back tomorrow, it's you haven't hit every question because we went off little rabbit trails. And that's the
Oh yeah.
beautiful part of it is to just let it flow and be organic.
Well, yeah.
And I think the beauty part, I enjoy watching comedy shows. And when you have someone that understands how to build and how to do things, kind of like what you said, and they're telling this story, and then you go over here. I remember hearing this guy that opened for Jerry Seinfeld years ago. The kid was from Omaha, Nebraska, and he tells this whole story about the grocery store and that little thing that you put there to make sure your stuff doesn't touch the person's in front of you stuff. And he goes about the whole thing, and then he talks about this. He tells this story or whatever, and then his final was talking about a country in Middle East invading another country. He goes, I don't know why we have these wars. If you want to stop one country from invading another, just get 10 million grocery line dividers. They won't touch it. But that
Easy.
was from 30 minutes earlier. He started that off and he finished it with a different joke.
The callback. The callback
Yeah.
keeps everybody in on the joke. And that is a beautiful example of keeping your whole room or your person that you're having your sales meeting with in the callback because now they're included, whether they made the funny or not, they're in on that joke. And that's the best part about professional improv is asking the audience, give me a place where two people might meet. Now give me an unusual sport. Now give me a color. And I put all those together to create a scene. They're not necessarily on the stage, but they are vetted in this happening well and having a good outcome. So right there, they're in on it. And that's how I'm able to say, I won't scare your introverts because I'm not going, you in the green shirt, get up here. I don't do that
Mhm.
because there's not every day that I want to be up here. So
Right.
I do respect that. But they're in on
So,
it and they want you to do well.
yeah. How does this process of working with teams, how does it bring about more collaboration? What are some other activities that you do with organizations that really foster this feeling of, as you said just a few moments ago, one person having another person's back?
Look how excited I am. I want to share this one with you. Thanks for that. We're going to play Let's Get Your Butt Fired. Ready? Here we go. All right. Tell me, both of you, either one who says it first, we are working where? Where do we work together? A soda
McDonald's.
factory. Soda
McDonald's.
factory. A McDonald's. Okay. Soda and McDonald's. Now, tell me, guys, we're all working at McDonald's. What would get us fired? Glenn, what would get us fired today?
Can I get a little bit of soda out of this drink?
So is my worker is drunk?
Maybe.
Maybe. So
Okay.
okay, so we've exchanged the soda with alcohol. Okay. What else could get us fired here at McDonald's?
Seeing if my tongue would actually stick to every frozen burger.
Again, I'm going to ask you for video, and yes, that would get us fired. Taste testing the frozen meat is definitely not accepted here at McDonald's. And I will toss in that we scream at every customer instead of saying have a happy Mickey day or whatever it is they say. Okay, so we just got us all fired, and now how can we make that workable? So let's go back to Glenn's alcohol reference. What could we put in the soda instead of alcohol that'll still be legal and won't get us fired?
Let's do the old fashioned, a little bit of Dr. Pepper, a little bit of Sprite, a little bit of Coke.
Swamp water. Okay,
Mhm.
it's free swamp water Tuesdays. And now we're going to go to Paul's idea of licking the meat. What can we do that would be legal and not so offensive?
Uh, Probably just kind of press it on the hot grill to make sure they separate.
Okay, so we're going to just up our game on frying the patties. And instead of screaming at the customers, what could I do that would be better? Maybe we sing to them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we just made it more of a fun day. You come in on Tuesdays, you're going to get the swamp water, your pressed meats, and a song. So come on in every Tuesday. So instead of getting fired, we just made it all workable. So you go from wacky to workable. And that's one thing I do with teams. And when we do
Mm-hmm.
this with the whole room, we find out really where everybody's head is at, too. A little bit, we just found out today where our heads are at. But also, it's funny later. Later on, they might reference the swamp water or things like that at their actual
Mm-hmm.
job. So we don't make up a job. We use their actual job. And I've done this before where we tried to get fired by having, somebody reference strippers and somebody reference drugs. I mean, it was funny because then you could say, we're going to go through your purse before you leave, Sally,
Right,
things like
right.
that. That's one way to play with the team that actually, when I worked with a security team at a hospital, they implemented what we implemented from Get Your Butt Fired was Silly Sock Day. And every other Friday was Silly Sock Day. And they would wear print socks, silly socks. And when we were passing in the hallway, because I worked there at that time, it was every other Friday, and we would lift a pant leg to show our socks. What do you think that looked like to everybody around? You've got the security guy coming up and showing you he's wearing SpongeBob socks, right? It's
That,
ridiculous. It's affordable. It's not harming anyone. And now you've got a club, an inclusive, affordable, fun club in your own place.
and you were creating an incredible sense of solidarity.
Whoa. Nice
I thought
pun.
she was just saying those were
Podiatry
the sock
pun.
strippers.
What's that, Glenn?
What's that,
I
Glenn?
thought those were the sock stripper days.
Uh-huh.
Ooh. Well, I want to hear more about that later.
All right. So, is there anything we haven't covered so far, Lisa, that you want to let our Blabbit audience know about you or about some of the things that you're doing? I will certainly ask how people can get in touch with you. The easiest way to do that is part of what you're about to say next. But what have you got?
Oh, I do the silly things like a podcast, Stranger Connections, where I want the weirdest stories and the quirkiest careers. If you juggle cats, you give me a call. And it's probably not
Mhm.
legal, so don't. But I love doing that. I have a group on Facebook called Counterclockwise, and it's all humor that is clean humor, nothing political, nothing naughty, just silly fun. And it's Counterclockwise on Facebook. We need more punchlines. We need less headlines. And instead of doom scrolling through your feed, look for something that's going to bring you joy and then carry on with that feeling. Let's not vague book and do the ickies anymore. So look for bloopers and things that are going to bring you joy. So yes, I've got a book and I made a journal of creative tips. And I love keynote speaking, whether it's over Zoom or in person. I would love to come and present to your company or do a
Cool.
workshop, whatevs.
So, what's the best way to get in touch?
LisaDavidOlson.com or Lisa David Olson on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn.
Okay.
Awesome. And just like that, the hours passed. How'd that happen?
Because we're fun. That's how. Except for the sock pun. Everything else
Yeah.
was fun.
Right. That one will go down in Blabbit history.
Totally. Get it?
Oh, it was a terrible yarn, I tell you.
You
I
really
just can't
socked
keep up
it
with
to
you
us.
guys.
All right.
Well, that's because we're a pair.
Oh, Lord. Okay. Quick, somebody pull the plug on this week's Blabbit. Thank you, Lisa, for being our guest. Glenn, great to see you, my friend. We will be back here next week. You know where to find us on all those wonderful social media platforms. All right. Till
Thank
next time,
you.
everybody.
Bye.
See you soon.